I want to read to you something just amazing from Mark Carney's Government Election Debates Commission. It's actually Trudeau's Debates Commission, but Carney hasn't changed it, so it's his now. They wrote a report a few weeks ago, and they're just obsessed with Rebel News. It's sort of amazing. I want to take you through it, but first, please let me give you 5 minutes of history, just as a refresher of the background here, but you'll want to stick around to actually look at their report. There is no reason why the government should run the election debates of a country. Strike that. There is a reason. There's just no good reason for it. For a century and a half, Canadians managed quite well with our own election debates, even as technology changed from the newspaper and leaflet days to the days of radio, to TV, to the internet. I literally cannot remember anyone ever in my whole life saying, hey, these election debates have a problem, and that problem can be solved by putting them in the hands of the government. I'm not saying the debates are perfect. Sometimes the format is better than others. Sometimes the hosts are better than others. But what's that got to do with who owns and controls the debates? Imagine giving it to government. The big media companies typically work together to host a few marquee debates that they'd all spend some money on producing as nicely as possible. Other organizations were free to host their own debates too. I think, for example, in 2015, the Globe and Mail had a debate on the economy. Here's just a few seconds of that.
Live from Calgary, welcome to the Globe and Mail Leaders Debate 2015. Please welcome tonight's co-host, Globe and Mail political reporter, Jane Tabor.
Welcome to the Globe and Mail Leaders Debate on the Economy, and welcome to Calgary in the Palomino Room at the BMO Centre in Stampede Park for a very special and exciting debate, one that's focused on only one topic, the most important issue of election 2015, the economy. And there's no better place for this debate than where we are tonight in Alberta.
So the Globe and Mail made a few decisions. They weren't going to include the leader of the Bloc Québécois in their English language debate. Makes sense. And they weren't going to invite the fringe candidate from the Green Party. You could say that's unfair, but the Liberals, Tories, and NDP all thought it was fair enough to participate. And if you don't like it, well, have your own debate and convince people to attend yours and watch yours. That's how it used to be. But while it's obviously not in the public interest to have politicians take over an important feature of democracy like the debates, it could be in the private interest of the incumbent, who could then appoint the debate commission with his friends and set it to his advantage. And so it was that Justin Trudeau simply nationalized the debates commission and took it over. I mean, he created it. And he put his hand-picked people to run it, including bizarrely personal friends, like Craig Kielburger from the corrupt Kielburger family. Remember them? There was also a far-left environmental activist, a lobbyist named Megan Leslie. He used to be an NDP politician. They put her on the commission. And the whole thing was run by longtime Trudeau family friend David Johnston. In other words, it was packed with activists with an axe to grind or just plain old Trudeau family friends. Again, a multi-million-dollar government solution to a problem that simply didn't exist. And the whole point of it immediately became obvious. The Debates Commission didn't do a better job than the media did at staffing the debate or organizing the debate or scheduling the debate or producing the debate. No, there was nothing better about it. In fact, there was little that was different about it. Although with a global warming lobbyist on the commission, you knew in advance it would be obsessed with global warming. No, the main difference, maybe the only difference, was that the Debates Commission used its government power to ban journalists that Trudeau didn't like. It's that simple. So in 2019, that's the first election after the Debates Commission was in force. They banned a small number of independent media, including Rebel News and our friends at True North. And they were really sneaky about it. They let us know at the last minute possible. I think it was on like a Friday, and the debate was, I think, on a Monday afternoon, if memory serves. So no notice, a surprise, ambush, and they gave no reasons. So it was pretty obvious why. Well, you know what happened next. I've told you this story before. It's one of my favorite stories. We lawyered up, and so did True North, and it was a miracle. We actually found a judge who was free on the Monday morning and a courtroom that was open and available and staff. It was really a lot of things that went right. And the case was heard very early Monday morning, if I recall. I'm going from memory here. And mirabile dictu, wouldn't you know there's a miracle, the judge agreed with us that it was unfair and that thing about being unfair is that if you are a government, you have to be fair, especially if you're taking away freedom of the press. There's that whole Charter of Rights thing. If this had been the Globe and Mail's private party, the charter would likely not have applied, but it was the government's event, and the government has to follow the Charter of Rights, and you can't just ban journalists because you don't like them. So we won. And the federal court ordered Trudeau's commission to accredit us immediately. Amongst the court's findings were that the government didn't have clear rules, they didn't give us any good reasons for banning us. The ruling from the Debates Commission was sent to us by just some guy, some rival reporter, not even the Debates Commission itself. There was a lot of weirdness that the court didn't like. So we got in. And it was glorious. Here's some of the questions we asked in the scrum back then.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. Since your multiple use of blackface became an international scandal, Canada's international reputation has been irreparably harmed. Have you reached out to any African leaders or any leaders from the Middle East to apologize for your conduct?
Canada will continue to engage in a positive, constructive way around the world, standing up for human rights, engaging with leaders right around the world, because we know that promoting our values and prosperity for everyone around the world is good for Canadians and creates better opportunities for everyone.
So that didn't answer the question at all. Have you spoken to any African leaders or leaders from the Middle East to apologize for your personal conduct?
I have continued to engage with leaders around the world in a responsible way during an election campaign. My focus is connecting with Canadians, as I was able to tonight. And I was very pleased to see so many of the questions turn to the environment. In all sections, there was a clear contrast between those on stage who don't think we should be fighting climate change and those of us who do. And again, we are the only party with a clear plan to fight climate change.
So that was 2019. Well, the government hated that. Trudeau hated that. So instead of following the law, he instructed his friends on the Debate Commission to reverse engineer an excuse for banning us. So instead of waiting until the last minute to ban us, they did what the judge said and gave us plenty of notice. Instead of having no rules, they had long and complex rules. Instead of giving us a one-line reason, I think it was an 11-page reason we were banned, and a government official, not some random guy, told us the bad news. So they took their 2019 court case, they read it carefully, and they said, okay, so we did 4 things wrong, let's fix all those so we can ban Rebel News and not have a problem. They must have spent hundreds of thousands on lawyers trying to patch up all the holes in their 2019 case for 2021, for the next election. And it looked pretty bleak. I remember our lawyer in 2021 told me we had no real chance, but of course we fight anyways. And again, it was a miracle, just amazing. The judge from the Federal Court of Canada, again, ordered the government to accredit us. It was like a thunderclap. Trudeau himself was outraged.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the Press Gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is, organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Oh, well. And then the next election came around, 2025, a few months ago, and we applied again for accreditation, and another miracle, 3 miracles in a row. The Debates Commission didn't actually try to stop us. They knew that if they dared to stop us, they would be defying the courts once, twice, a third time. Imagine banning us in the face of 2 court rulings. The judges would be furious with them, so they just surrendered to us and allowed us to have our journalists, and it was wonderful. And the other media were outraged. Oh my God, they were so mad, but tough noogies. I mean, once every 4 years we get to ask the Prime Minister a question. It's good for him. But boy, did the liberal media howl. Literally, they shouted. They shouted at our reporters when we asked the question. The microphones didn't really pick it up, but when Drea Humphrey asked this question, other reporters started shouting at her. The atrocious liberal hack, Justin Ling, trying to shout down a woman. Here's Drea's question.
Hello, Mr. Singh. Drea Humphrey with
Drea.
Rebel News. Your party takes great pride in standing against hate such as white supremacy, Islamophobia, and online.
Sorry, I didn't get your outlet.
Drea Humphrey with Rebel News.
Okay.
Your party.
You know where I'm going to go with this, all right?
Can I speak?
Yeah, you can. I'm just going to say you know where I'm going to go with it, though.
Wow.
Your party takes pride in standing against hate such as white
garbage.
supremacy,
It's a garbage
Islamophobia,
man.
and online hate speech. Yet you stay silent about ongoing attacks against Christians, even after conservative MP Jamil Javani's order paper question revealed that over 200 churches have been targeted by arson and vandalism since claims of remains being discovered at former residential schools swept the nation in 2021. These claims have been disproven by bands that excavated and remain unproven by those that have not. Will you condemn the rise in acts of hate against Christians today and explain what your party will do moving forward to keep Christians safe from hate in Canada?
Again, thank you, but I'm not going to respond to an organization that promotes
What a ridiculous
misinformation and
person.
disinformation like Rebel News. So no, I'm not going to respond to your question.
Wow.
What she said had
Questions and answers
had
short.
no
We're
misinformation
just
in
getting
it.
up to time.
Perhaps you didn't hear me. Over 200 Christian places of worship have been attacked in Canada since 2021. Many served First Nations communities, many were historic, and they diverted police and resources and put others at risk. What do you say to Canadians who see your refusal to answer, especially from one of the few media outlets here that are not funded by the state,
Beautiful.
as proof that a vote for you is a vote for a dangerous radical party that gaslights the public into thinking it stands against hate when its silence is instead emboldening Christophobia?
Your question is another example of why I don't respond to agencies like Rebel News that promote misinformation and disinformation.
And later on, that wicked liar at the CBC, Rosemary Barton, just couldn't stand the fact that Drea gets to ask one question every 4 years. In this case, it was of that loser, Jagmeet Singh. You won't, that loser, who cares? I mean, he's so unimportant, but oh my God, Rosemary Barton didn't want poor Jagmeet Singh to have to answer a question from Drea.
I think we have to sort of address the elephant in the room. How are these people chosen to answer these questions? And I don't know if either one of you have an answer for that, but I think there will be people at home saying, some of these seem like odd questions. Some of them aren't getting answered. How come we've heard so often from this one particular outlet? Any idea what's going on there?
There's 3 right-wing, very right-wing media, we can call them media, websites that are present in there. They get in line to ask a question like anybody else. Their accreditation has been approved by the Commission of Debates, and so they get the right to stand in line and ask a question that they choose to ask. In this case, you saw Mr. Singh, and this has been his position for some time, to refuse to answer questions. Rebel News in particular traffics in misinformation, facts, lack of facts, and as you heard in that question, which was woven with some truth and some things that weren't true. Yes, there have been burnings of Christian Catholic churches. Yes, there have been remains of Indigenous children found in various places around the country, which she misrepresented. We'll see if Mr. Poilievre gets any questions from right-wing organizations. I would suspect no.
Okay.
Holy moly, does the regime media ever act like they own the place? And by the place, I mean Canada. They shouted, they stomped their feet, and I mean that literally. It was sort of amazing, but most of the rage from the regime media was not towards us. It was towards the debate commission for not fighting us in court a third time. They kept saying, look, the Debates Commission kept saying to them, look, the courts agree with Rebel News. We're going to lose if we fight them again. What could they do? Indeed. And this guy, Michel Cormier, who sort of runs the Debate Commission, he went from interview to interview just being pummeled by the regime media. I actually felt a little bad for him. So time passes. The debate's over. Here we are. It's fall. And this Government Debates Commission releases their annual report, something that probably 3 people in the whole country have read. But I'm one of those 3 people. And I want to read to you a couple of fascinating parts of their report because it shows how awful these government bureaucrats are. So this is the report. You can find it online. Can I read about a couple minutes of it to you just to show you their thinking? So it's called 2025 Media Accreditation Policy. That's what I'm reading from. It's halfway through the report. Given the judicial decisions in both 2019 and 2021, the Commission determined that media representatives seeking accreditation for the leaders' debates in 2025 would be accredited based on their assignment by a media organization. For this purpose, the Commission's policy defined a, quote, media organization broadly as one that either produces original news content related to coverage of Canadian or international political news or covers political, social, and policy issues. The Commission's media accreditation policy was published in August 2024 to ensure that organizations had ample time to review it in advance of applying for accreditation. The policy also stated that participation in the post-debate press conferences would be limited to 1 reporter and 1 still photographer per media organization in order to allow participation by as many different media organizations as possible. Now it gets fun. Rebel News took the position that each of its 5 stated divisions, you know the 5 Rebel News divisions, don't you? Rebel News Canada, Rebel News French division, that's Ezra Levant and Guillaume Roy. Rebel News' Ontario division, that's our buddy David Menzies. Rebel News' Prairie division, that's our friend Sheila Gunn Reid. And Rebel News' West Coast division, well, that's Drea Humphrey, don't you know, was a separate media organization and threatened legal action to obtain urgent injunctive relief if 1 reporter from each of these divisions was not allowed to participate in the press conferences. Well, of course we did. For the same reason that the CBC had their English division and had their French division and all of their dozens of staff there. Do you really think we're going to restrict ourselves to just 1 reporter and let the CBC state broadcaster have like a dozen people there? No, thank you. We're on par with them, and the Debate Commission obviously agreed since they approved it. Here, let me keep reading. Given the previous cases, and rather than devote resources to responding to an urgent injunction, especially on a compressed timeline, the Commission agreed to provide 5 reporters from Rebel News with passes for the press conference. To ensure an equivalent level of fairness to all media organizations, the Commission then provided additional press conference access to other organizations based on the number of platforms or outlets within their organization. For example, for the CBC, this meant that rather than 1 reporter, 4 reporters would have access to the press conferences, 1 each to represent CBC News, its main network news programming, CBC News Network, CBC Radio, and CBC.ca. So you see, we had the same status at the CBC. Fair is fair. They hated that. They normally get, there's so many CBC staff there, it's so gross. So we just want to be treated equally, and they agreed. So here's where they start to whine, because our people got in line to ask questions sooner than the other media, who I might say are just a teeny tiny bit lazy. So here's what they said about the fact that we got in line. The 2025 debates generated heightened media interest. Just over 200 applicants from 60 organizations were accredited, representing a 30% increase from 2021. During the French debate, the first of the 2 debates, representatives from 1 media organization asked 4 of the 16 questions that time permitted, limiting the opportunity for other media organizations to ask questions. Yeah, so did the CBC. What's your point? Get in line. I mean, just stop lazing about. Frustration over this imbalance. Frustration by whom, buddy? Combined with a difference of opinion about who should and should not have received accreditation. Well, who cares? Escalated the following night at the English debate. The ensuing disruption in the press room ultimately resulted in the Commission's decision to cancel the leaders' press conferences following the English debate over concerns that a respectful and functional environment for the leaders could not be guaranteed. Translation, other media started to shout at us, so instead of letting us ask more questions along with the rest of the media, they just shut the whole thing down. They came up with a lame excuse, a respectful and functional environment. What does that even mean? Our questions were perfectly respectful. It was the regime journalists who were condemning us, heckling us, shouting at us, and it was that loser Jagmeet Singh who was so disrespectful to Drea. But it was the Debate Commission's only way to stop us from asking more great questions was to ban everyone, shut the whole thing down. Now, I think you know all this because we told you about it while it was happening. It was extremely exciting. But here's the news part. Here's the go forward. Here's how the Debate Commission handled the fact that they're just not allowed to block us. The courts won't let them block us. They know the courts would shred them. So here's their summary of the whole thing going forward. This is the news in their report. Options for the next debates. Media coverage of the debates, both immediate and in the days following, amplifies their impact and extends their reach. However, if reporting focuses on events in the media room, Canadians are less likely to focus on what the leaders said during the debate itself. Controversy which overshadows the debates themselves is not in the public interest. The Commission is committed to keeping the focus and attention centered on the debates. That's just some made-up thing. Canadians can't handle learning that regime journalists shouted down the rebels. So, hey, keep your focus over here. That's what? I mean, even if that were true, so what? If politicians say something strange or powerful or interesting, or if they get an interesting question to them in the scrum, why should that not be the news? Why is it the Commission's job, government bureaucrats, to make sure people focus only on what the government wants them to focus on? There sure better not be a controversy in the election. Oh my gosh, we can't have a controversy in the election. That's the last thing we want in an election. Anyways, let me get back to their report. Following the 2025 debates, the Commission faced a number of fundamental questions. Should the Commission continue to manage media accreditation? Should the Commission continue to manage the post-debate press conferences for the media to engage in the leaders following each debate? Should the Commission be involved in trying to define journalism? Now I'm going to skip ahead a bit. There was no consensus on any of the issues related to media accreditation and the press conferences of party leaders, nor was there a consensus on what constitutes a media organization, what defines journalism, or what is a journalist. Some stakeholders noted that journalism is not a regulated profession like law or medicine, and that there is no legal definition for journalism that can be upheld in court. That's true. In fact, that may have been us who said that. Now, you'd think this is where the government bureaucrat might have a little bit of self-awareness and say, so what are we doing here again? Why are we in this position? What possible benefit has there been to the public by putting us in charge? The one thing we were hired to do, censor journalists on behalf of Trudeau and now Carney, has been found to be illegal. Let's just shut her down. Are you kidding? These are bureaucrats. Let me read what they decided. Commission's recommendation, after carefully considering the feedback received, the Commission recommends that it should continue to accredit the media and provide them with working spaces and facilities for live broadcasts. However, the Commission should not provide facilities for on-site press conferences by party leaders. Parties may organize their own press conferences at another location if they wish, as in, the government is now going to shut it all down, all the questions, because they can't handle the criticism of Rebel News by the regime journalists. Because Rebel News has 4 questions, apparently, instead of 3, or whatever they think is the right number, because other journalists shouted at Drea. So they're panicking. They're simply going to eliminate journalistic scrums afterwards altogether. They can't do their job. They don't know how to handle it. They hate the mean girls of the media party. They're just going to abandon their work, but still get paid, of course. The whole public rationale of this debates commission, if you believe it, which I don't, it was all about censoring Rebel News. The whole public rationale was to have maximum exposure, maximum transparency, maximum participation, maximum viewership. You'd think they'd therefore accredit maximum journalists. But too many people at the CBC and the rest of the regime just hate us so much and bullied the commission's boss so much. Seriously, he was abused by every other journalist there for daring to accredit us, even though he had no choice in the matter. So they're just nuking the whole thing, as in they would rather burn the whole village down. They would rather destroy the entire scrum, the entire part where journalists get involved, rather than let us ask questions of Rebel News. They pretty much put it that way. They note that the other journalists shouted at us, were ill-behaved, they reject us, and we saw that, how they just swarmed the debates manager for daring to let us in. So they pretty much say it out loud, quote, While the Commission could seek to organize and manage press conferences with clear and enforceable rules, for example, limiting the number of questions per media organization, a system for who gets to ask questions, and a code of conduct to manage these rules, rules alone may not be sufficient to guarantee a respectful and functional environment and could lead to contention and litigation over their imposition. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that means other than the obvious, because they or the regime media can't handle Rebel News being allowed in there. They're just deleting it. They're just they're just stopping that. They have a monopoly in debates. It's not like there's anyone else that's going to have a debate. So we gave them monopoly, and it's too tough for them. It's too hard. So they're just going to cut it in half. The fun part was asking the questions of the leaders afterwards. But this all suits Mark Carney just fine, doesn't it? I've always said there will soon only be two kinds of journalists in Canada: those paid by the government and those banned by the government. We're getting closer to that every day, aren't we?